I need to get through a lot because I want to relate to the what's happening in the country as well at the end of the Shiur and what happened yesterday evening and what's going on at the moment. We haven't really spoken about it. But let's start with the Parsha. I'm going to start already, and so the Parshat begins, "V'yidaber Moshe ken el bnei Yisrael v'lo shamu el Moshe mikotze ruach u'me'avodah kasha." Moshe Rabbeinu is talking about redemption. He's talking about Geula, and the people did not listen to Moshe. Mikotze ruach, they were short of breath, and they had a lot of work. I remember Moshe as well. Moshe as well has failed. He came last week with promises of freedom and they got hard work. That's what the people got. They got hard work instead of freedom. So see what the Klali says here. We have a number of Parshanim and they're all saying more or less the same thing. And I have to admit that I have edited the Klali to the pieces that we need. שכל הסיפור מן וארה אל אברהם עד ונתתי אותה לכם מורשה, this entire beginning of the parsha from God speaking about being in front and appearing in front of Abraham, לא נזכר בו פרעה כלל שישלחם מארצו. The fact that Pharaoh should release the people is not mentioned at all. ויובן מזה, and we understand from this, כאילו רצה השם שיצאו מעצמם. It's a big chidush. God really wanted us to come out on our own, not to be released by Pharaoh, but to rise up and leave. That we would have a will to leave Egypt. Below hormana de malka, without Pharaoh ordering us to leave, we would just get up and leave. Kichen mashma lashon v'otzeiti v'lakachti. I will take you out. I will bring you out. Even though he's already said to Pharaoh, send my people, let my people go. Perhaps after Pharaoh denies us the right to leave, that we would leave Egypt despite Pharaoh. We would get up and leave Egypt. Moshe thought the people just don't want to leave. They don't want to leave Egypt. They don't want Geula. And therefore Moshe says to God, if the people don't want to go, how will Pharaoh listen to me? What will I say to him? He'll say to you, your people don't want to go anyway. What's the big deal? You say they want to go, but they don't want to go. He will take their refusal as an excuse. Why should I release them? They don't want to go. And when God saw this mistake of Israel, he wanted to correct them. And therefore, you see this double pasuk. He commanded Bnei Yisrael and Pharaoh to take the children out of Israel, meaning us first. We have to want to leave first. Before that will happen, we have to want to leave. Not only do we need the person who's sending us, we need to want to leave. Not just for a vacation. We need to want to leave. We need to want to leave. You can't have one without the other. The Netziv will elaborate. Speak to the children of Israel that they want to leave, that they want it. Speak to them positive things that will make them want to leave Egypt. And then speak to Pharaoh and tell him to let them go. And as we'll see in next week's Parsha in Rashi, those people who did not want to leave died in the plague of Choshech. And the numbers are scary. Meaning, if we use the math that I've used in previous Shiurim, that about 3 million Jews came out of Egypt, meaning 600,000 men between the ages of 20 and 60, then we have to assume there were women, equal amount of women of that age, and an equal amount of people younger and older. Close to 3 million people came out of Egypt. If 4/5 of the people died in the plague of Choshech, that means that 12 million Jews died a month before Yetziat Mitzrayim. 12 million Jews died a month before Yetziat Mitzrayim. Something to ponder on, according to Chazal. Now see what the Emek Davar says, the Netziv. Those of you who are coming to Poland next week, we're going to see the Netziv. It's very exciting. We're going to see the Netziv. Reb Chaim lying together there in Warsaw. Gewaldig. Very, very great to be there with the Netziv. And so we'll have a bit of Netziv Torah. We hear this phrase very often, Yad Chazaka uvizroa netuya. Right? We've heard that phrase, Beyad Chazaka uvizroa netuya. Yesh levaer hashinuyim hanoflim b'mikra b'zeh. We have to understand the differences in these words. Pam kativ biyad chazaka lechud. Sometimes the pasuk says God is going to bring us out biyad chazaka, with a strong hand. Or pam kativ biyad chazaka uvizroa netuya. And sometimes it says with a strong hand and an outstretched arm. V'kan kativ b'zroa netuya. Now our pasuk there, he's commenting on Perek Vav, pasuk Vav. It just says an outstretched arm. So sometimes it's Yad Chazaka, sometimes it's Roa Netuya, sometimes it's Yad Chazaka uvizroa netuya. V'lo katib b'yad chazaka, v'lo davar reiku chalila. And this is not by coincidence. It's not by coincidence that sometimes one part of the phrase, sometimes the other part of the phrase, and sometimes both parts of the phrase are used. U'mitchila yesh lahakdim lashon brayta de Mechilta. First of all, I need to quote you a midrash in the Mechilta. Parsha b'shalach ala pasuk v'yosha Hashem etzel miyad Mitzrayim. The Mechilta is on a pasuk in the Parsha b'shalach, 2 weeks' time. V'yosha Hashem etzel miyad Mitzrayim. That God saved the Jewish people from the hands of Egypt. Ka'adam shu'ochez et hatzipor she'imratsa miyad hu chonka. He says, of course, if a man is holding a bird, then that man is in a position of control. If the man is not scared of the bird and has a long fingernail, this is how they did it in the Beit Mikdash, he can strangle, kill, break the bird's neck in a second. If I have a bird in the palm of my hand, I can break the bird's neck in a second. V'habiyur, and he's going to explain, Demilvad chozet malchut Mitzrayim be'otah zman hayu od shnei dvarim lemifka letachlit ha'yetziah. Besides, he will elaborate, besides the fact that we were slaves in Egypt, there were two other problems that were pertinent to us being stuck in Egypt. Echad shayu kol Yisrael b'makom echad. One is that all of the Jews were in one place. And if all of the Jews in one place, then they can all be killed in one swipe. Ve'im kein k'shera'a paro yad Hashem ki chazaka hi alav, haya efshar lechalot et Yisrael b'pam achad. Once Pharaoh sees that God is overcoming him, he can just wipe them all out. We've understood that. We fought a war for 1.5 years, and the reason we haven't been able to do what we wanted to do is because they could have killed all the kidnapped hostages in one go. They've still got their finger on the button. Uvda, the 6 that were killed, the soldiers were minutes away from them. So if everyone's in one place, they can just kill them. In Psachim it says, the Midrash talks about the fact that God has spread us out in the Galut, that we're not all in one place. That's what Yaakov does when he's going to meet Esav. He divides the camp. If Esav hits one part of the camp, the other part of the camp will survive. In Egypt, we're all in one place. That's a real danger. We're all in one place. He can wipe us out in one swipe. Like a bird in the hand of one person. You can just break the bird's neck. And if someone comes and hits him a few times so he'll let go, if you're hurting me and I've got the bird in my hand and I know you want the bird, I'll just break the bird's neck and that will annoy you. And that will be my revenge on you for hitting me. Then the person hitting me will not gain anything. Meaning if God is smiting me, I'll get God, I'll kill his people. They're all in one place, I can kill them in one blow. That was the worry that the Jews had. But God saved them. ולזה לא היה מועיל באמת תוקף המכות, אלא היה לזה עצה כאשר היינו מייעצים למכה תוחז הציפור, שבשעה שהוא מכה לא יהיו הכותיו בהפסק בינתיים. The way to stop him breaking the neck of the bird is to keep hitting him so much that he's reacting all the time to the knocks that he's getting. He won't have time or concentration to break the bird's neck. שיהיה בזה כדי להתחשב מה לעשות להכיס. That's what זרוע נטויה means. When God hits him time and time and time again, not giving Pharaoh a minute to think about taking revenge on the Jewish people. Remember at the beginning, at the end of last week's Parshat, Moshe asks for something, annoys Pharaoh, and he gives us more work. Nothing's bothering Pharaoh, nothing's stopping Pharaoh from doing it, so he does. But when the plagues are coming one after another, Pharaoh's got no time. He's got no time to contemplate what shall I do to the Jews. He's trying to look after his people. His economy is falling apart. Every time they were resting from the Makkah, another Makkah came. They weren't able to calm down and think because they were getting over it, and then another Makkah came, and then another Makkah, and another Makkah. And they can't look at the bird in their hand because they're too busy holding their hand. אלא אותה מכה שעברה שימשה מאיתה באנשים פרטים מגדולי פרעה וחכמיו. וכדאיתה ברב השמות. Over the page. והביאו ראיה מדכתיב, הנה אנוכי נוגף. וכל זה היה בכדי שלא יהיה פרעה ויועציו שעה פנויה להסכים לזה. That's raw נטויה. I'm going to hit him and hit him and hit him and hit him, and he won't be able to do anything to the bird that he has in his grasp. וזה הנקרא בזרוע נטויה. That's what it means, זרוע נטויה. If you've heard this pasuk so many times, Zerah Natuya, an outstretched arm means again and again and again. V'darash hamagid zo acherev, perush mitashia be makah lemaka. Shenit, but what's the second problem? She'eno mo'il chozek hamakot lotzia ta mu'uneh miyad ma'anav ele b'ofen kashe hamu'uneh tzoek latzeit. It doesn't matter how much you hit the oppressor if the oppressed doesn't want to leave. The same as a kliyaka. The bird I can release the grip of the man on the bird, but if the bird doesn't want to fly, I can't do anything about it. You understand the mashal, right? He's holding it. I'm stopping him from breaking the neck of the bird, but if the bird refuses to fly, the bird will not have freedom. So it doesn't matter how many times you hit the oppressor if the oppressed doesn't want to leave. And that was also in Egypt. And it's a chidush. I don't think you've heard this before. Even you, Ruby, I don't think you've heard this before. Did you know that? Did you know that there were Jews who didn't want to leave Egypt? There were Jews who didn't want to leave Egypt. Because some of them were very rich, and some of them were ministers to Pharaoh, or because they didn't want to go and serve God at Har Sinai. They like visiting Israel, but we don't want a Beit Mikdash. What am I going to do? I like Central Avenue. Why would I want a Beit Mikdash? I'd have to come and live here. I don't want to live here. I'll come visit. I don't want to live here. They didn't want to. They didn't want to fly. And that's yad chazakah. God has to release. He had to take them out against their will because they didn't want to leave. You heard that? And I want to describe something to you. My wife wasn't so impressed, so you don't have to be impressed either. I want to describe something to you which is very interesting. The Gemara, which I didn't bring you here, the Gemara in Rosh Hashanah says that after 6 months of plagues, the slavery stopped. After 6 months of plagues, the slavery stopped. Now, I passed by that Gemara so many times and didn't think twice about it. But then I started thinking about it, and I realized this is very mashma'oti. Why is it mashma'oti? Because when Moshe comes to Egypt at the beginning, the people are slaves. The people are suffering. They're being killed. They're being raped. They're suffering like we suffered generation after generation, time and time again. And he says, I'm going to take you out. That's great. What else do we need? But ponder for a second, if after 6 months of slavery stopped, There's a new option. I can stay in Egypt and buy some real estate. I'm not a slave anymore. Why do I need to go out into the desert, Be'eretz Lo Zeruah, to a place that has... Why should I do that? I can stay in Egypt, build a little shtibler, have minyanim every 10 minutes, have kosher restaurants everywhere. And why would I need to leave Egypt? That was the state of Am Yisrael in the middle of this process of the Makot, where God is hitting and hitting and hitting Pharaoh again. The matzav of Am Yisrael is getting easier. And when it gets easier, people don't want to leave. Just compare and contrast the rhetoric that there was this time last year to going to Colombia and the rhetoric now about going to Colombia. It's all got a bit easier now. Everyone's forgotten what happened 10 months ago. Everyone's forgotten what they said in the U of P and in Harvard. Everyone's forgotten already. And we can think about doing it again. Because we're only aware when the danger stares us in the face and then we forget about it. So it's not just a matter of zroa netuyah, of having an outstretched arm. It's also a matter of yad chazakah. God has to sometimes force us out of galut because we don't want to leave. We don't want to leave. Now have a look at the Meshech Chochmah. The Meshech Chochmah is dealing with a specific issue which I'm sure you've come across if you're going through the Parsha, because it stands out, and a few girls have already asked me about this when we're sitting in the Beit Midrash in the mornings. We had this conversation between Moshe and HaKadosh Baruch Hu about whether he will take the people out or not, and he doesn't want to. And then suddenly we have this, he says the people won't listen to me. And then suddenly we have this list of genealogy which goes to Reuven, Shimon and Levi and stops. And then goes back to the dialogue between Moshe and HaKadosh Baruch Hu until Moshe is told, this is what you're going to do. And everyone is asking, why do we have this genealogy of Reuven, Shimon and Levi in the middle? It's not the genealogy of all Am Yisrael, and then you could try and work out what it's there for. But it's a genealogy of Reuven, Shimon and Levi. So what's it doing there? See what the Meshech... Now this is a Meshech Chochmah, okay? So this isn't a vault. This is Torah. So and the end of the pasuk is exactly what we saw earlier in the Kliyaka. An incredible thing. God says to Moshe, go and command the children of Israel and Pharaoh to release the children of Israel. Why do you have to command the children of Israel to release the children of Israel? So the Kliyaka says because they didn't want to go. But the Meshech Chochmah goes a stage further. See what he says. Mind-blowing. I'm pretty convinced you, unless one of your rabbis has told you this, you haven't come across this before. Unless you learn Meshech Chochmah Keseda or the Yerushalmi. V'yitzavem el b'nei Yisrael vel paro lo'tzii et b'nei Yisrael. Yitachen ki, it could well be, ki gam az b'Mitzrayim hayu gdolei ha'umah asher hayu sarim nichbadim ve'efratim. It could be that at that time in Egypt there were Jews who were very powerful people. V'hem hayu meshabdim et b'nei Yisrael la'avadim, and they even had Jewish slaves. Jews had Jewish slaves. We had Jewish capos in the Holocaust. We had certain heads of Judenrat, or certain heads of Jewish police, not everyone, for sure not everyone, who would sell out Jews. And there were Jews who had slaves in Egypt. You heard that before? Shemachru hamitzrim lahem, they bought them from Egyptians. Ve'ilu haya hema hashlosha shvatim, and I think that they came from the tribes of Reuven, Shimon, and Levi. And he's going to explain. Moshe turns around to Pharaoh, turns around to God and says to God, Pharaoh's not going to let the chevra out. Why? Because Jews have slaves. And people in glass houses don't throw stones. I'm going to go and preach freedom to Pharaoh. And he's going to say, go to Levi family, he's got slaves. Go to Shimon's family, he's got slaves. And what am I going to say back? I'm preaching freedom, I'm preaching liberalism, and Pharaoh's going to point my back garden and say, but your own people are doing this. And that's why they are enumerated here. Shinhigu Sharab Mitzrayim. These people had slaves in Egypt. Kamoshita b'midrash Naso Parshat, and I didn't make it up, he says, you'll find it in the Midrash. In Parshat Naso, Parshat Yud Gimel, Levi shelo haya b'shibud Mitzrayim. Levi were not slaves in Egypt. That's why they didn't get a nachala ba'aretz. V'chein Reuven lo natal rak be'ev, even Reuven, they weren't slaves in Egypt, so they don't have a chelek in Eretz Yisrael. They were on the other side of the Yarden. V'Shimon itkayem alachem be'Yaakov, and Shimon doesn't have his own nachala, because these three tribes had slaves. Totally different take. Umehem ayu b'nei chorin habeh v'sarim, and they were free people, and they became ministers. Asher yu mishabdim et Yisrael nimkarim lahem me'amemshala shel Paro, and they would buy slaves from Pharaoh. That's why these three tribes are named in the middle of the Parsha. ומסיים, הוא אהרון ומשה, הוציאו את בני ישראל מארץ ישראל מעל סביבותם, שיהיו כל משפחה ושבט צבאה בפני עצמו, ולא ישתבעו ישראל זה לזה. But before you start talking to the Egyptians, first make sure that Jews understand it's exactly the same, but the Kliyaka said one thing, the Siv said something else, and the Meshachar goes even further. They don't want to just leave Galut. They want to stay in Galut, and they want to be like the Goyim in Galut. They want to have slaves like the Goyim have slaves in Galut. That history just never changes. It just never changes. This is what now look at the Yerushalmi, the amazing sources Meshech Chochmah brings. What did Moshe have to command Bnei Yisrael? What's he got to do with Bnei Yisrael? He's talking to Pharaoh, al Parshat Shiluach Avadim, to release their slaves. Jews had slaves in Egypt. They're more in the Galut than the Galut. I'm not finished. V'hadahu dichtiv ko amar Hashem anochi karati brit et avotechem b'yom hotzi otam me'eretz Mitzrayim mebeit avadim le'mor. מקי 7 שנים תשלחו איש את אחיו העברי, הנאמר בירמיהו. וייתכן לומר בדעת המדרש נעשו, ששלושה שבטים אלו הנהיגו שררה במצרים. לפיכך נתייחסו כאן, and that's why they're mentioned here, and that's another story of the Galut. Meaning we have a phenomena in the history of the Jewish people where we simply don't want to leave exile. Skip a page, I'll go back to it, not to worry, don't get worried about it. Go to the top of the next page, some Psukim in Shir HaShirim. The Psukim in Shir HaShirim, as you know, Shir HaShirim is a story about a man and his lover. But according to Chazal, is a mashal of the relationship between Am Yisrael and HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And what does the Pasuk say? Ani yeshena v'libi er. I am sleeping, but my heart is awake. Kol dodi dofek, the voice of my beloved is knocking. Pitchili achoti rayati yonati tamati. Open up, my beloved. Open up the door. The lover, the man, is knocking on the door. Open up the door. Open up the door. Sheroshinim latal kavutzotai resisei laila. And what does the lover say in reply? What does a woman reply? What does Am Yisrael reply to God? Pashatati et kutanti eichacha el beshena. I've put on my pajamas. I'm not getting dressed now. He's knocking at the door. He's saying, open up the door. Listen, I'm in my nightdress already. And eventually he keeps knocking and knocking and knocking. And Lazy Bones is lying on his bed, her bed. And ultimately, the tragedy of Shir HaShirim, Kamti ani liftoach ledodi. Eventually, I got up to open the door. V'yadai natfu mor ve'etzbotayim mor over al kapot hamanul. I put perfume and oils on my hands. Patachti ani ledodi. And I opened up the door for my beloved. V'dodi chamak avar. And he wasn't there. By the time I got up to open the door, the opportunity had been lost. The history of the Jewish people. Opportunities lost. The second Beit Mikdash. Only 40,000 Jews came back to the second Beit Mikdash. Go back to the Kuzari. As you know, the Kuzari is a dialogue between the king of the Khuzars. Rabbi Yehuda Halevi is a Jewish philosopher speaking back. And this is already the second ma'amar. I don't know whether you've reached this with Rav Yosef. And the Kuzari says, after he's speaking so much about the land of Israel, and he says to him as follows, אם כן אתה מקצה בחובת תורתך, שאין אתה משים מגמתך המקום הזה, ותשימנו בית חייך ומותיך. You have turned this Beit Mikdash, this land of Israel, into the essence of your life. ואתה אומר, and you say in your tefillot, Rachem al Sion, we say it every week at Haftarah, Rachem al Sion, have mercy on Sion, ki hi beit chayenu. We say it every week in every shul all over the world, ki hi beit chayenu. This is the house where we live. Ki hi beit chayenu, here the Rova, ki hi beit chayenu. V'ta'amin ki hashchina sheba'ana. And we believe there is Shekhinah here, on Har HaBayit. ואילו לא היה למעלה אלא התמדת השכינה בה באורך תף שנה, היה מן הדין שתחשפנה נפשות. And if that was the only thing about Yerushalayim, that the Shekhinah is on Yerushalayim, that would be enough. כאשר יקרא אותנו במקומות הנביאים וחסידים, like any place where there was נבואה or חסידות, כל שכן שהיא שער השמיים, even more so when Yaakov identifies Yerushalayim as being שער השמיים, the gates to heaven. וכבר הסכימו כל האומות, and the whole world agrees. The whole world agrees. The Christians say Jerusalem is holy. The Muslims say Jerusalem is holy. The entire monotheistic world agrees that Jerusalem is the center of Ruchaniyut. Hanotzrim omrim, the Goyim, the Christians say, שהנפשות נקבצות אליה, that the souls gather there. וממנה מעלין אותם לשמיים. From there they go up to Jerusalem. Hayishme'elin, the Muslims say, Ki hu makom aliyat hanavim el hashamayim. This is a place where the prophets go up to heaven. V'shehi makom ma'amad yom adin. This is a place of judgment. V'hu l'chol makom kamanah v'chag. And this place is about chag, is about festivity. Sheishtachavitecha v'kriyatecha negda chonef. O minhan mebiti kavanah v'kvar yu avotecha mishrim bocharim ladurba. And your forefathers wanted to live there. Everyone wanted to live in Jerusalem. מכל מקומות מולדתם. ובוחרים הגרות בה יותר משהיו אזרחים ממקומותם. כל זה, אם שלא הייתה בעת ההיא נראית השכינה בה, אבל הייתה מלאה זימה ועבודה זרה, ואם כל זה לא הייתה להם תאווה אלא לעמוד בה. Even when the place was full of avodah zara, our forefathers wanted to live here. Your forefathers. ושלא לצאת ממנו, and they wouldn't even leave there at a time of hunger and famine. And they would give their lives for it. And the Kuzari is saying, so where are your people? Why aren't they knocking on the door of Yerushalayim? Why aren't there pictures of Yerushalayim in every house? There are pictures of El-Aqsa in every house. And what does the Chaver say in reply? Hovashtani melech Kuzar, you have found my shame. V'ha'avon hazeh, this massive transgression. That we didn't complete the redemption in Beit Sheni for the same reasons that we didn't want to leave Egypt. Because God was knocking at the door. It could have been the final redemption at the time of the second Beit Mikdash. כאשר בתחילה אילו היו מסכימים כולם לשוב בנפש חפצה, had everyone come back when God knocked at the door, it could have been the גאולה שלמה. אבל שבו מקצתם, but only a few came back. I need you to concentrate here. This is important. This is real. שבו מקצתם, ונשארו רובם, and the majority stayed בבבל, in Bavel. רוצים בגלות, they wanted exile, ובעבודה שלא ייפרדו ממשכנותיהם וענייניהם, they didn't want to leave their palaces. ושמע על זה אמר שלמה, and maybe that's what Shlomo HaMelech means in those psukim in Shir HaShirim, אני ישנה וליבי ער. I am asleep, and my heart is awake. Kina galut b'sheina. Galut is like sleeping. People are sleeping. V'halev ha'er hatmadat ha'nevuah b'nehem. And every so often the heart awakens you. Kol dodi dofek. And God is knocking at the door. What did Rav Soloveitchik say? He knocked at the door. Rav Soloveitchik wrote his essay in 1956. As before the Six-Day War. He talks about 5 or 6 knocks. Incredible miracles that happened to our people, which should have been A wake-up call. Kol dodi dofek. I don't know how to put into words. We spent so much time in our lives learning Torah in theory that we've forgotten that it's true. We've forgotten that it's real. V'shuv Hashem et shivat Sion ayinu kocholmim. God brings us back and we're dreaming. We're dreaming. People have been praying for this for 2,000 years and it's happening in front of us and people are dreaming. Kol dodi dofek. Kriyat ha'elokim l'shuv. God calls. So if you want to follow one of our teachers that God doesn't speak with words, God speaks with actions. God speaks with actions, or he doesn't do that either. God speaks with actions. Six-Day War wasn't an action. Ethiopian Jewry wasn't an action. Soviet Jewry wasn't an action. We're in such a deep sleep. Things that we've been reading in Psukim are happening before our eyes, and we don't want to leave. We don't want to leave. So I got my night dress on. I'm not going to open up the door now. No. I finished college. I don't want to open up the door now. Got business. I don't want to open the door now. And he's knocking at the door. Now what happens, ladies, when we open the door and he's not there anymore? And what are we going to say? What are we going to say when we miss the opportunity? It can happen before. What are we going to say? Or perhaps we don't believe. It could be that we just don't believe. We just sing the songs, dance the dance, but we don't really believe. What are we going to say when we open the door and he's not there anymore? He said, but I was there. I gave you Jerusalem in 1967. I gave you the country in 1948 when you had one aeroplane. Against the Egyptians, the Syrians, the Jordanians, you had one aeroplane. I gave you the whole country. I was knocking at the door, I was banging the door down, you couldn't get up. I got my nightdress on. Yeah. I got my nightdress on. Dodi shalach yado min achor. He puts his hand through the keyhole. When Ezra was telling us to make Aliyah in the second Beit Mikdash, and Ezra and Nehemiah were trying to get us to leave, the people who came weren't full-hearted coming. And therefore things were shortened because of the approach that we had. Exactly like the Kli Yakar. The godly things will not happen if we don't take the opportunities and do it ourselves. He can zroa natuya, but he cannot. Yad chazaka, we have to want to leave. We have to take the opportunity. Had we answered with a full heart, then we would have got Yetziat Mitzrayim. That's what eventually happened. And see what he says in the next, right at the end of the book, the last words of the book. See what he says. I don't know why you're laughing, it's not funny. It's not funny. So either you're not listening or you don't understand what I'm saying, but it's not funny. It's the reality of the Jewish people. God is knocking at the door. We don't answer the door. See what he says at the end of... How many times have you sang this song, ladies, but you don't know the end of the pasuk? Or if you do know the end of the pasuk, you don't associate it with the song. What does he say at the end of his book, the Kuzari? The Kuzari wrote the song, Sion, 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 halot hishali. He wrote the song. He would have loved to have come. And what does he write at the end of the book? Uve'arab b'nei adam hi'torutam al ahavat ha'makom hahu ha'kadosh. If people really loved our country, schar gadol v'gemur rav, there would be enormous reward. Kamosh ne'emah, ata takum terachem Sion, ki eit lechenana kiva moed. Ata takum. How many times have we said ata takum? The God should stand up. Ki eit lechenana kiva moed, because the time has come. Kiva moed. You know the song. Everyone, put your hands up if you know the song. It won't hurt. You won't hurt your hand. You won't dislocate anything. Yep, hands up. Tara, you know the song. Atat kakum. So put your hand up. Come on. Who's next to you dozing there? Neil. Just put your hand up. Just put your hand up. Just put your hand up. Right, great. See, she knows. Everyone knows the song. Do you know the end of the song? Do you know the end of the pasuk? Atatakum. Do you know the end of the pasuk? I'm going to tell you the end of the pasuk. What does the end of the pasuk say? Kiratsu avadecha et avaneha et afara yochonenu. Why should God kiva moed? Why is it kiva moed? Look at the pasuk. Look at the pasuk. Gabby, don't pull her hair. Just look at the pasuk. Look at the pasuk. Why should God kiva moed? Kiratsu avadecha et avaneha et afara yochonenu. Because his people are in love with the soil and they yearn for it. When the people yearn for the land, then God, atatakum, then he will do it. Kiva moed, the moed is dependent on us, just like Klali talks about the Jews in Egypt, they had to want to leave. Just like the Meshech Chochmah says they didn't want to leave, just like the Netziv says they didn't want to leave. So kiva moed is contingent to kiratsu avadecha et avanea, that the people wanted. You know, when our soldiers went into Gaza the first time, every single house they had to raid had a picture of Temple Mount. Every single house. And our soldiers understood very quickly, and they started putting pads of Yerushalayim on their arms. We need to want Yerushalayim. We need to want Yerushalayim as much as other people want Yerushalayim. And we have to be prepared to open the door. Even if we've got our boxer shorts on and we're not dressed properly, just open the door, because it's an opportunity. And opportunities come and go. And I know Rabbi Herzog, of blessed memory, said there won't be a third Korban, but no one's got an open check. And so history repeats itself, or does it? Or are we able to hear the voice of God and do something about it? This is a question, ladies, that I've hardly asked you. I'm sure Rav Shvat has asked you, but it's fundamental to my life. It's fundamental to my life. There are two realities, right? There's my private micro reality, which I live my life, I do my stuff, and I do what I do. And then there's my national reality. Like my teacher, my son, who's about to start medicine but has spent the last 10 months either in Gaza or in Lebanon. He came out of Lebanon this morning, and he'll probably be back in tomorrow. So he has his personal interest, which is to be a doctor, but it's been on hold for 9 months. So he can fight for his people, so he can fight for his country. Do we have the ability to see beyond? Every place you go in this country, nothing was here. Read Mark Twain. Have you ever read Mark Twain? Have you read Mark Twain? So you know Mark Twain came to Israel, and you know he saw nothing. There was nothing here. There were no Palestinians. There was no one here. Nothing was here. It was a swamp. Who built this country? We built this country. We built this country. Who built the country? People who opened the door. People who opened the door. I'm trying to give a message which I think is real. I think when we learn Parshat, we should try and understand it. Not just to share, not just hear something. Understand this is real. It's true. It's happening. Knocking on the door. Incredible knocks on the door. So the question I asked myself 35 years ago is a question I've asked you a few times. Not just about Israel, but about what you're doing here. Do you want to take pictures, or do you want to be in the picture? I don't want to take pictures. I want to be in the picture. I don't know what the picture is going to look like by the end of my life. I don't know when the end of my life will be, but I want to be in the picture. It's a fundamental decision that I made 35 years ago. I want to be in the picture. It's far more important than my personal life. I gave up on certain dreams I had in my personal life because I wanted to come here, and I knew I couldn't do those dreams here. I couldn't fulfill those dreams here. But the overall picture of Am Yisrael, the question here is, it's a question we're asking ourselves all the time. Do you really believe? Do you really believe? How did I title this? L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim? What came to my mind? There's no way you can know what came to my mind. I had a student here, a lovely lady, many, many years ago, one of my first American students. She was called Ani Kadosh. And I every morning greeted her, Ani Kadosh! She had a husband who was more of a fanatical Zionist than myself. He works in Ir David to this day. And he came up to me once, the year after they made Aliyah, and he said that he told me a story. He was catering at a Seder night in some place in America where lots of families were going for Seder. And at the end of the Seder, they start singing L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. And he's sitting there with a moany face. And someone comes up and says, get up, dance, get up, dance. And he said, let me just ask you a question. Did you reserve this place for next year? He said, of course, we love it here. So what are you singing about? L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim. You've already reserved, you have your reservations for next Pesach. What do you mean, L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim? You don't even mean it. You don't even mean it. You've already reserved, you have reservations for next year. I don't know whether it's Florida, upstate, I don't know where it was. You've already got reservations for next year. So why are you singing L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim? Really? L'shana haba b'Yerushalayim? You have no intention to be in Yerushalayim. You don't even think it, you don't mean it. Nish, nothing. So in what way are we different from Egyptian Jews who didn't want to leave Egypt? On the contrary, the only promise Moshe could give them was, come after me into the wilderness. And we've got a country, we've got an army. Don't know about you, I feel safer in Israel than I feel over there. I got my son, I've got a gun, we look after ourselves here, we're not relying on them anymore. We did that for too many years and lost too many lives. Too many lives. So we're not walking into a wilderness, walking into an established country with an army and a government. It's not Lech Tech Acharai Bamidbar. And still we don't want to leave. So we learn Yetziat Mitzrayim, you have to think inwards what Yetziat Mitzrayim means. You can't just put your wall up because it's not comfortable to hear what I'm saying. Because the truth penetrates every wall. The truth penetrates everything. There could be no Jewish people more established than the Jews of Europe in the last century. What's left? Nothing. They don't minyan in Krakow anymore. They can't get a minyan without tourists. They don't minyan in Warsaw. 3 million Jews 80 years ago. There's nothing left. Nothing. The Yeshiva, nothing. The Ukraine, Lithuania, 280,000 Jews wiped off the face of the earth. 95% of Lithuanian Jews wiped off the face of the earth. Disappeared. A world forgotten. It's our history. It's who we are. And God starts knocking at the door. We're not going to open up the door. There are things to learn in our Parsha. I can't control the Egyptians and what the Egyptians are and who the Egyptians are. It has nothing to do with me. But what about me? What about me? And there's me, David, and there's me, Am Yisrael. So me, David, it could be very good for me to be in a certain place and do things and fulfill myself as an individual. The swamps were drained in Israel by people who had doctorates. They gave up their academia, they came here and they drained swamps and they got malaria and they died from malaria. And they fought. Every time you walk through Sha'at Zion, you ever notice the bullets at Sha'at Zion? Have a look. Notice the bullets. You know how we can walk through Sha'at Zion? Because soldiers fought for Sha'at Zion. That's how we can walk through, because people came here and gave up everything for Am Yisrael. But I want to finish because I feel that I must say something regarding, and you haven't got this here, I must say something. I was going to do a Nativot Shalom, but I feel that I have to share with you. Now, when I lived in England, I don't think it's much different now in England, America, Canada, Germany, Switzerland, wherever you come from, the headlines in the newspaper on a regular day were not particularly inviting not scary, not interesting, maybe unemployment, maybe inflation. If you read a normal newspaper, if you read a tabloid, then Haley and Justin had a baby or they didn't have a baby. Whatever, you see certain things, nothing, every single day is part of the mahut, part of the quality of our life in this country, is that every single day is massive. I have to tell you, share with you, enormous mixed emotions. We have been fighting for a year and a half. We've lost over 800 soldiers. Good friends have lost their children. I've been to more funerals in the last year than I've been in my whole life. I've been to Har Herzl in the last year more than I've been my whole life. Tragedy after tragedy. Hundreds of our soldiers have committed their lives to destroy Hamas. And in the end, we have this equation where last night 3 of our people were released for over 100 murderers. Murderers. The murderer of my neighbor was released. He's a murderer. This isn't an equal transaction where we release civilians. We don't arrest civilians. We're a democratic, good country. We don't arrest civilians. And we don't kill murderers when they're caught. So we have murderers in our jails. And 3 innocent women were released for over 100 murderers who are now roaming Yehuda v'Shomron. And probably some of us will pay for it with our lives. Because these murderers, Baduk, right? Because of course you all know that Sinwar was released for Gilad Shalit. So these murderers just come out and do it again because they are murderers by name and murderers by nature. And then it happened last night. And I took the opportunity because you were in a Yom Iyun to go visit my dad in Netanya. So I was in the car for 2 hours on the way, 2 hours on the way back, listened to Shiur a bit, but listened to the news as well. And then I saw the pictures. I'm not interested in the pictures of terrorists shooting guns in the air, but I saw the pictures of mothers and daughters being reunited. God knows what these girls have been through. The girl's just a bit older than you. God knows what they've been through. And perhaps they were released first because they are the most healthy looking. I was hoping the baby would be released, but I imagine the baby's probably not alive. I don't know how a baby can survive for a year and a half. And you have mixed emotions, right? Because on the one hand, this is wonderful. I was crying. I was watching these films, mamish tears. Incredible films of just watching families reunite. Innocent girls like you reunite with their mothers after a year and a half, 20 feet under the ground with animals. And so you ask yourself the question, and people look at you. Now you and I know, I think you know this, the American government would never do this, ever, and never have done this. They would never release 100 murderers for 3 Americans. In fact, if the American government had attacked Gaza, they would have totally wiped out Gaza above the ground and beneath the ground, and they would have said, it's a shame about the hostages, but we don't negotiate with terrorists. And the British government would have done the same. Any Western government would have done the same. Ladies, the reason they take hostages is because they know that we have a Jewish heart and we care about our people. In truth, we all knew on October the 7th that we can't win the war in the truest form of winning the war because they have over 200 of our people and we have to get them out. The die was cast on the first day. We did win the war. We've wiped them. 90% we wiped them out. Their leaders, who would have believed Nasrallah, Sinwar, Assad ran away. It's been a very successful military year, but the end we have the scenes of releasing 3 people who are our people, and in return we have to let 100 terrorists out. So how do I feel about it? And then a comment that my Rosh Hashiva made came to mind. I just want to share it with you. My Rosh Hashiva came from Hungary. His entire family was destroyed in the Holocaust. He survived because he wasn't sent to Auschwitz like most Jews in the shtetl in Hungary, but he was sent to a labor camp. And he survived by being in a labor camp. And he spoke a lot about the Shoah. And he says, I heard him say this, but it's in writing. So, Im hayda nekudat or achad b'Shoah hayta zot. He said, if I saw one glimmer of light in the Holocaust, it was the following. Hayu sham shnei machanot. There are 2 defined camps. Machaneh harotzchim. There is the camp of the murderers, or machaneh hanirtzachim, and the camp of the murdered. The Ashreinu, and I am happy, and we should be happy. She'anu hishtayachnu lemachaneh hanirtzachim, that we were the murdered. Ya'idu aleinu shamayim va'aretz, let the heaven and earth bear testimony to us. Lu nitna habrera lekneset zel itchalef b'tafkid. Had we been given the choice to swap roles, for us to be the murderers and for the Germans to be the murdered, Hayta Knesset Zel Omeret, we would have said, Adif liyot bein hanirtzachim velo bein harotzchim. We'd rather be murdered than murder. Mul olam omed al damam shel yeladim. When we see a world that stands quietly on the blood of children, shel milyonei nefashot, millions of souls, Amadnu anu b'tzad hasheni, we were on the other side. No other country on the world was on the other side. Because before the war, they wouldn't let us in. They wouldn't take us. Not the Americans. The British took 50,000 children. No one else would take us. We stood alone. The victims alone. Anachnu yodim shekol hasina she'umot ha'olam sonim otanu. All the hate there is for us in the world is because of our Torah, is because of our belief. And that's why we say to God, Alecha horagnu kol hayom. We die in your name every day. And I thought of this comment, and I looked for it, and I found it, so I could share it with you. And suddenly, my head was raised, and my shoulders went back. And I said to myself, okay, David, this is a reality. Who do you want to be affiliated to? Animals shooting their guns in Gaza and celebrating the release of murderers of women and children? Or do you want to be affiliated to a people who will do anything to bring their innocent people home? It's not a hard question. We think with our business minds on how we've been had, we've been tricked. We haven't been tricked because we have remained and will remain human beings. We remain in the image of God. It's something to be proud of, that we are prepared to release 100, 1,000 people for 3 Jewish souls. That we're prepared to release people for bodies of our soldiers. It's something to be proud of. It's what Kiddush Hashem really means. Kiddush Hashem isn't just getting up for someone on a train. Kiddush Hashem is being the ambassador of God in this world. Is presenting God in this world. And the only way you can represent God in this world is by retaining the image of God. And we have retained the image of God. When I went to meet my son and his unit before they went into Gaza over a year ago, I sat with them. I felt very humbled, much braver and much more important people than me. People half my age at least. And I said to them, this isn't a war about us and them. You are fighting in the name of humanity. And if that means that we give them 100 terrorists for 3 innocent women, so be it. Good will always outlive evil. And if they try and kill us, we'll kill them. Hashem yeh b'ozreinu. But with all of it took me a long time to come to the conclusion, with all of the dilemma all of the hurt, because no one likes losing. You don't want to see the baddies get out. But then as I was sitting in the car and seeing what I was seeing, I actually saw what I saw when I got home, but I was listening in the car, I felt such an inner pride. Ashreinu matov chelkeinu, we can be proud that is our name in the world, that they will go out for every single Jew. They will go looking for every single Jew, and they will pay any price for any single Jew. That is a Kiddush Hashem. That is a Selem Elokim. I'm not going into halachic discussions of that, whether you should, and bottom line, it's done. It's done. But I'm very proud to be affiliated to a nation that will persevere good at any cost. And I hope that you are proud too, that is who your people are. I was thinking today, all these naive protesters in university, when they see the pictures coming from Gaza of men with masks shooting in the air and shooting their own people, they still believe in the cause? When they come out of their holes, the little rats come out of their holes, and they start gnawing at people's feet and eating their own people, they're still going to protest for them? When they're shooting the lesbians and the homosexuals, hanging them, they're still going to protest for them? And we stay Am Yisrael, focused on our matara, to be worthy of being God's people and representing God in the world. There is every reason, with all of the ka'ev, for that to be overcome by pride. A government of Jews looks out for its people. And it doesn't matter what the cost is. It's something to think about. We are living through so many things that to simply read a headline and ignore it without digesting and trying to turn it over would also be to hear a knock on the door and to stay in bed. You have to open the door, try and understand what's happening, and kal v'chomer ben benoshel kal v'chomer if you're here and you're seeing it live, to be able to appreciate the greatness of where you are and the greatness of the people around you. Okay.